I'd like to advise council that maybe having some communication issues with the microphone, so we've got these smaller pucks that are here, so we can have to speak a little bit louder to make certain that everybody online is able to hear us. Real quick, we did try to schedule a meeting, both for this evening and tomorrow evening. Unfortunately, there were conflicts for this evening. We were not able to do it, so we got it at 2:00 today, but tomorrow will be at 5:00. So with that, Mr. Orlando, I will turn it right over to you.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Yes, and to provide some clarity, something broke in the back room where they handle all of the IT and the networking, so I apologize for that. What's important to know is that we'll have to just talk loud in here so everyone in the room can hear. But I'm told that we're able to hear, people are able to hear as they're logging into Facebook, YouTube Live, however people are watching it. So it's really important, Sean, that if that breaks at some point during the meeting, that folks in that room tell us, so because being available remotely and virtually is very important. So don't be shy, Tom, to tell us. Time out.
We need to adopt the agenda.
Yeah.
Oh, my apologies. So with that said, is there a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor signify by raising your right hand. So moved. All right, Mark.
All right. Yes, sir. Well, welcome everybody, and thanks to this senior team for all their hard work, and to town council for your leadership and direction in this budget. So what we're covering today are 5 of the 6 funds, and for time's sake, really for effort, what you're about to see is not much different. Maybe 1 or 2 slides we've improved upon since first reading. And so what I would like to do, so just an overview, we're going to look at 5 funds today, everything with the exception of capital improvement program, which is tomorrow at 5:00. So what I'd like to do today is just start diving into each fund and address each fund as we go. So what I don't want to do is an hour of presentation to y'all and save your questions at the end, and then we go back. So I'm not going to revisit some of the work we've already done, teeing up or highlighting the big overview of the budget. What I'd like to do is just start diving into revenues and expenditures in each of our 5 funds that we'll cover today. So this presentation is an iteration of what you first saw, but again, this presentation is also a part of the packet that was distributed last week and available to the public and the media online. So it is really important that we realize and remember that the comprehensive plan guides the strategic plan, and that strategic plan is influenced by and influences our annual operating budget. The goals that you see on the left side are those preliminary goals and strategies that were outcomes of the recent strategic plan workshop. We realize as a staff that we don't have a strategic plan in front of us to say to you, this strategic plan is 100% aligned with the budget. We will have a workshop next month. We will validate those strategies and help prioritize the tactics that are attached to each one of those at that workshop in June for potential hopeful adoption in July. Today is our second meeting on this, our budget workshop, and like I said, general fund, debt service, stormwater, Gullah Geechee Historic Neighborhood Community Development Corp., and housing funds will be talked about today. I've proposed to you at first reading $174,711,000 consolidated budget made up of general fund, debt service, general fund of 59.7, debt service of 18.8, capital improvements made up of $47.5 million beach renourishment, $30.1 million in other projects, which we'll cover tomorrow. Stormwater utility, 11.1, Gullah Geechee CDC, 3.2, and housing, 3.9. This is a full schedule of all revenues that have been utilized to prepare our budget, a full schedule of revenues showing property taxes, and on down.
Mr. Lund, if we can go back real quick, I think this is a good time to address what I brought up in April regarding the parking. Obviously, we know that there is a revenue item of $650,000. And in an attempt to make certain that we are addressing it correctly, I asked you to bring to CSPS, and I've had conversations with some council members as well, about a potential of a county annual fee at a fee of $100 or so, and then also to discuss the Saturday, Sunday to see if there's a way that those numbers, those rates need to be discussed. So it's just about making certain that it's a strong program and going forward, and that's what I'd like to see happen. I believe it's at CSPS on Monday.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
From a revenue standpoint, we have plugged into this schedule of revenue $650,000, which we anticipate the revenues to be. We're tracking those monthly. Whatever decisions we make will change some of our assumptions, but by no means will we bring anything forward that we believe without talking slowly and loudly that we wouldn't match the revenues that are associated with this budget. Does anybody want me to go slower through the schedule of revenues before we get into general fund? Keep in mind, we're going to show the revenues that are impacting and helping the general fund. Good. All right. I will fast forward. We talked about millage. We talked that this budget reduces millage rate. We talked about what those impacts are per million on a 4% and per million on a 6%. Excuse me. We talked about the utilization of a tax across the board and how it affects. So our general fund, we know, is to be our operating account, where it's made up of property taxes, local A taxes, business license, franchise fees, permit fees, and the like. Transfers in of beach preservation fee, amongst a lot of other revenue streams. Oops. Kim, can you hit escape, please? I double-clicked the team viewer. Thank you. Whatever that is. Adriana, can you please explain the transfers in from the Gatsby policies? That has been a question, Mayor and Council. It's been a question over time. It's accounting principles from a public accounting standpoint, and Adriana will help with the overview.
Yes, so like Mark just mentioned, the South Carolina, actually also known as interfund transfers, are generally governed by South Carolina statewide cash transfer policy and the government accounting standards for gas. So the way it is defined, transfers in and out, there's 4 different types. So the first ones are transfers in to support our operations after projects. The second one is a fund-based accounting, where different funds are used for specific purposes. The third one is internal reallocation of resources. And the fourth one is money received by one government from another government in the same entity. So to give an example, for instance, we have fish-related functions. So we have fish patrol, we have cleanup, we have code enforcement. So that is all paid
with beach preservation funds. So when we're looking at the beach preservation fund and we have all this operating excess, what normally happens is we do a transfer where we transfer from the beach preservation to the general fund to cover this type of expenses. So that's what transfers in and out. That's what we're trying to do, making sure that we're utilizing the special funds in some cases and moving them to the major funds, in this case, the general fund, to pay for operating expenses. Is that clear for everybody, or is there something else that I need to clarify things better?
Mary,
The way I understand this, and correct me if I'm wrong, The reason we have transfers in and then money going back out is that you have to collect it in a specific account to account for it.
Yeah.
And so it has to come into a special account as opposed to coming into the bucket of all accounts.
That is
And then once we decide to spend it, you move it then into the special expenditure area so we can spend the money for those purposes that are restricted.
yes, and during the budget process, when you are approving the
In the
budget.
budgets, one of the things that you are approving is transfers that you're transferring from one fund to one.
That's the way my less than accountant mind works.
Well, that's a good interpretation.
Good, thank you.
Good, that helps, right? And we know that it's common in fund-based accounting. So I'm glad that we can just pause for a second and it's funds in and funds out. So good.
Mayor, while we're on, sorry,
If you will turn your mic on.
I thought it didn't work.
Well, just in case.
It works
Okay.
online. It works on,
Oh, I'm sorry.
it works
Okay.
for those folks listening in.
I apologize for those folks who couldn't hear me before. So on the revenues, I mentioned this at the public hearing last week, and that is business licenses. The state has changed some things, and we are waiting to see how that change affects us. This is our best information to be able to make the calculation as to how much we expect based on our prior history. But we may have to make some changes during this fiscal year based upon the changes in state law, as I understand it.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So we have not received from the state the information that
What's going to be affected? At this point, we don't have the actual calculation to be say, this is how much money we're talking about.
On that is Act 176. So if any of us want to look it up, South Carolina Act 176 requires every municipality to update its business licensing class schedule every odd number year to go into effect the following year. So we've done that. Remember a couple years ago, we had a revenue neutral stance, a revenue neutral goal, and we updated our class study in business licensing. These changes will impact us beginning in 26 as the renewals are due by April 30, 26. So we still have some time to work on this, but the schedule will be June of this year. MASC publishes the class schedule. We have to do a rate study and then bring it forward to town council, probably most likely in September to F&A, council, October, November, December, while we update that class and rate study. And keep in mind, the work that needs to be done is aligning the new rate, the old rate with the new rate, and that at the least we can talk with you about is a revenue neutral position. So I appreciate you bringing that point up. I wish we knew what that was right now and how it would affect us. It's the same situation we were in last time, but with that revenue neutral analysis, we make sense of it.
Thank you.
So is this okay? This is a workshop, so it's a conversation. So I think that's good so far. Stop me as you need to. So I'm at the first reading of the budget in my presentation a couple days ago. I went through these highlights pretty fast. So I think today we just talk through them and walk through them, and if there's questions, let me know. So general fund property taxes. It's a small decrease, more or less flat. Millage was reduced by 1.6 mils from 15.9 to 14.3. And we added $1.5 million of the town's former contribution to TIF, which expires this year. We talked about a couple steps we need to make to expire and expire the TIF and reset our property tax revenue collection. Local A-tax, we're using $6.8 million in the budget. We're projecting a flat, really a 1% decrease, but know that local accommodations taxes are being used in the same ways they've been used for the last several years. Cultural affairs, code enforcement, revenue collection, facilities, maintenance, they're really what we're, and fire rescue, of course. What we're doing is we're using our local A-tax, which help supplement the property tax revenues so that we can continue to support the operating side of our budget, but only in those areas that are impacted and need to be in place to support tourism and visitor based, but definitely a benefit 360 degrees.
Right, and you know, I think it's very important for us to, you got a slide in the original budget proposal whereby the millage for general fund for other municipalities is considerably higher than what we have at 15 point or 14.3.
Yes, sir.
So it is, as we talk about the economic aspect of our community and how it drives revenues and affords us to do the things that we were able to do, it's very important that we keep that in mind because it is a low number, very low number for taxpayers.
Right. Agree.
I'll just add to that, Mr. Mayor. In the highlights here, the millage decrease, obviously there's a dollar amount that we can assign to the millage. When you look at millage decrease, and also anticipated decrease in our ATAX local collections, but no decrease in the services that we're talking about providing. I think that's really the highlight of this whole that we don't need to be talking about. So obviously, we're going to celebrate the fact that we're decreasing millage. But we've got to continue to communicate to our public the value that we have when it comes to our diverse revenue sources that are, in a lot of cases, really spurred and developed through our number one industry, which is tourism. I just think it's important that we say that.
I think it's also important to highlight where those dollars came from to allow us to reduce the millage. I believe there's a discussion around collection of lease fees that needs to be had, or at least acknowledged for the public. That is largely because that we're no longer collecting, the town is no longer collecting those fees that we otherwise would have put into escrow for the Beaufort County Sheriffs. And since we've stopped doing that practice, it's allowed us to reduce the millage. So that's where these cuts are really come from. And in addition to the good work that the town manager and department heads have done to really streamline their own budgets and to make us a more efficient town with regard to the monies that we spend and how we operate. So that's largely where that came from. The ATAX really didn't impact this reduction in millage.
No.
So I just want to make sure that we're clear and we don't start talking in a different way, associating ATAX to this when it came from somewhere else.
Okay, those are all good points. I did go through it fast, but y'all make a good point, right? Our millage, while our millage is decreasing in mill value, our millage is only increasing slightly, right? Our mill value and our total mill value isn't increasing astronomically where it's allowing this. We've cut, and you're going to see some of those highlights, but what you've seen is we've cut millage, which is a reduction in property tax collection. Our other revenues are starting to stabilize, and you can see up here, and this is general fund, not the full schedule, but so general fund, we're looking at 140,000, 140.5.78 of the general fund decreased this year coming, right? Fiscal year 26 compared to last. And so we're moving backwards. You start seeing 23 actuals close to our 26 proposed. And so by reducing those revenues, local ATAX less 68,000, business licensing just up from the health of our businesses 874. Everything else you see on here, there's prior year funds decrease, beach decrease, TIP decrease, state ATAX transfer and decrease. So you're starting to see some, I would say, the real equilibrium of our budget starting to calibrate. And we were not able to balance our budget this year with the exception of cutting operating, and you'll see that as I get through this.
One of the other advantages, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that while the mill has decreased, the value of a mill has increased because of our property values increasing. And so we're also fortunate that we live in a town where property values are escalating, and that's a good thing for everyone. And that also allows for us to remain in a good position with regard to our budget. So
Right.
there's a number of different factors that I think are all good.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you back up, Mr. Orlando, to the slide you just did? Yes, here. Just to sort of reiterate the point. And Ms. Bonet started to sort of talk us through the transfer in
Process.
Okay. When you look at our total proposed general fund budget, the bottom line,
Yeah.
which is almost 60 million.
Yeah.
Then you start to talk through those transfer ins.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I was going, as far
Right.
as the health of our diverse revenue streams and what helps us to get to that $60 million number, where the property tax is at the top, is heard of that? Okay, so it's an important story as to how this business is really run from diverse revenue streams. That's sort of where I was getting at. I think that depicts it pretty heavily right there.
Right. That makes sense. I hear what you're saying. And really the real impacts, of course, property tax, that just makes sense across the board, right? The 4%, the 6%, whether it's a short-term rental or not, where you're looking at those revenues, sir, that you're talking about is out of business licensing, right? It's out of, here we go, beach preservation, hospitality tax, 6.5%. State aid tax 3.5, and that's for operating, and the short-term rental permit fee that wasn't on the board a few years ago, $1.8 million, and we've started to use those types of revenues to support the operating 365 days a year.
And to the point Mr.
Oh.
Brown was making, sorry to
What?
make you back
Yes,
up
ma'am.
the slide again. But if you look at local accommodations tax, 6.8 million. And then if you look at hospitality tax, 6.5 million, state aid tax, 3.5 million. So Ms. Hunter can help me better with math, but there's 10 million in the transfers in, and then there's 6.8, so almost 7 million. So 7 plus 10 is 17 million as best I add it. 17 million out of the almost 60 million comes from the tourism industry. So that's the point there. And how we balance that out and the impact on those who live here full time is by the services that we provide. And so we do a great job of delivering quality services based on that diverse income stream reliant upon the tourism industry.
Can I ask, revenue side, what is the quality level of your crystal ball that forecasts tourism and the derivative revenues that come from that, business license and real taxes? Do we have one of the best crystal balls around?
Yeah, it's kept in the safe back there. Have you seen the safe? No.
You just look at trends, right? The crystal ball, there's nothing better to look at the future than the past. So we have, as we look at our revenues in those areas, we take a look at prior year projections, but really most importantly, prior year actuals to look at those trends. We have also studied and taken a look as short-term rentals as an example. Are the permits coming in as a faster pace, the same pace? Are 4% still the same as they used to be, or do we have more 6%ers? So we're looking at all of those factors for months and months in advance of understanding our revenues. And sometimes you don't have the confidence that you had prior year, which I would say this year is that year. And we scale back to closer to prior year actuals in those areas that have more, I would say, of a risk for a blip downward, local tax, short-term rentals than in the past. And we monitor it monthly, right? We take a look at it. We know when our revenues are coming in from a property tax standpoint, a business license standpoint, and we monitor our revenues. You know, it's not unlike some companies. It's a per month. You're busier at Christmas than you are in February. We know when the cycle of our revenues come in that we track and monitor.
I would just like to congratulate you, Mark, and the staff in the finance department, because not just this year, but in past years, that conservative approach has always served us well, and we haven't missed a beat because we've taken that approach. And I'm grateful that you're continuing to present that policy to us. And congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. Beach parking, we talked about a $650,000 anticipated revenue, and we're starting to look at that. Our first month in, while I think it was March, Sean, was that a first month of revenues? But it was March. I started just multiplying it by 12, hoping we can get to 650. We couldn't based upon March, right? But come April and May, we're starting to realize that we're almost on point. I will say that the initial goal of raising dollars through parking is not right. I've always said from the day I've arrived, I don't want us to be in the parking revenue business. I want us to be in the parking management business. And so what we're doing is trying to cover our costs, but also improve the parking service. At the end of the day, it's not about enforcement. It's about having a quality experience while you're here, whether you live here or are just here for a little bit as you park. And you should be respectful, but the other people parking around you should be respectful too. That's the goal.
Absolutely. And I think that some of what we're doing with allowing the code change or working on the code change to create additional opportunities for enforcement, right? For parking fines, parking violations, short-term rental violations, having that amended code will help improve the overall parking as well. And one thing I should have mentioned earlier, and I'm sorry to do this again, through the contacts that we've all received, this will be my last comment. There are some employers that were concerned about their employees and not coming back down and not feeling that they were appreciated with this parking. So when I have that conversation, there is an economic aspect that I'm looking at because we know there's challenges with employees getting here. And is it, potentially an added benefit for an annual pass? It potentially is, but that's what council I'd like for those discussions to be with CSPS, but I don't want to harp on that by any means.
I look forward to those conversations. I know that it's on the agenda on the 19th. I'm hoping that we'll have some of those statistics that have already been gathered, the expenses anticipated, additional expenses, and any revenue, so that we can begin to see a pattern. And then there'll be a lot more, I'm sure, said and discussed on Monday. So I welcome everybody to attend that meeting.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, just so you know, Mark and I can't be there. We've got another meeting that morning.
That's okay. If the residents can come, that'd be great.
And just as important, I see Sean over there taking notes because he's going to be giving a good presentation. So unspent, so we're still in revenue, but unspent prior year fund. We talked about this at first reading, but to slow down and explain it, that is 275 anticipated, at least projected, dollars left on the contract for the land management ordinance, right? While it's under contract, the work's not yet performed, and we anticipate spending those dollars between July 1 and December 31 of this year, but into the next fiscal year. So we're simply asking for that transfer of unspent prior year general fund for that reason. Beach preservation fee reduced to transfer to general fund to preserve funding for the beach renourishment project in the CIP. So no, in past years, we used more dollars for beach preservation and general fund operating than we are this year. Why? Well, I think because that was the good feedback, or the feedback we're receiving from you as we're contemplating this beach renourishment funding strategy. Hospitality tax, more or less the same. It's a 4% increase projected. Funding for fire truck, tax exempt lease agreement. We talked about that at town council, as well as utilizing it for the fire rescue operations and maintenance of town facilities. TIF funding, 0, right? Prior year was 110, no funding due to the conclusion of our TIF. Stormwater fee, we've transferred more dollars into the general fund this year from stormwater, simply because we're starting to wrap our hands and arms around, really your arms, around the work it takes for staff to perform the MS4 NPDES permitting and all that goes into that. And so we've captured those SWU dollars to attach to a little bit of revenue needed to balance the budget for that work.
Mayor, if I could ask a question there or maybe make a point. So while transferring some money for stormwater fee for staff time, if you will, we're going to be talking about the stormwater fund later, and it doesn't reduce the amount of money we're spending for stormwater improvements because that's a substantial increase. So while this shows money coming in to the general fund, it does not diminish, especially with all the rain we've had, the planned efforts to improve stormwater systems on the island when we see that fund come up for discussion later.
Correct. Thank you. General fund policy remains the same for the general fund reserve policy limits. We talked about that as a 40 and 55 minimum and maximum policy, where our actuals are considerably more. Expenditures.
Excuse me, I did have a question on, try to speak louder, so you can hear me better. So we have accrued money for police, and the balance of $10 million. Does that show up in the general fund?
Shows up in here between the 30, a little more than 30 and close to 40. I don't know the exact number on here, but I'm just looking at a graph, 48. We have it in the back of the presentation. That's where it lives.
Okay, it might be useful to footnote that.
Okay.
Because you could say it makes us look a little bit better than we are, depending on what happens with lawsuits, et cetera.
We'll footnote it here, Adriana, as well as in the back. Okay. So general fund budget expenditures. And so we're balancing our budget with those revenues we just went over and our expenditures. So you can see salaries, benefits, and operating, right? Salaries up 3%, benefits up 7.9, really 8%, and operating down close to 7%. Contracted public safety, to Ms. Becker's question earlier, a great one. You will see that the 2.6 million revised for 25, 2.56 actual for 23, 2.59 for actual 24. You'll see that down considerably, 84%, a negative balance of $2.2 million, and we have been accruing approximately $2 million a year for the Beaufort County Sheriff's Office fee. So the last year was the final year. There are funds in fund balance in that regard. We've collected it for 5 years, so $2 million over 5 years is $10 million. And we do have in front of us here a reduction of accrual in that regard from an expenditure standpoint. And then affiliated agencies, you saw 23, we see 23 actuals of 1.9. It increased to 2 in 24, a revised 3.2 in FY25, and a 38, almost a 39% reduction this year. And then we are taking so that we have a housing fund, all inclusive, similar to how we're operating in some other areas. We're transferring salaries and operating from the chief housing officer to the housing fund.
Mark, sorry, well, we're talking about that slide. Affiliated agencies, the Finance Administrative Committee looked at elements of developing a policy about funding affiliated agencies. So for the public members, we're going to be looking at putting those elements together into a policy in the near future, just to let you know that. And we took a careful look at the request this year in line with what our thinking is about what those key elements should be to be an affiliated agency. The other thing to the conversation about public safety and the reduction of at least 2 million that we have been setting aside into a fund based on the lawsuit with the county about the sheriff's fee. And for our constituents, the concern has been paying 3 times. Once the county tax, second, the town setting aside $2 million a year, and thirdly, the fee that the county has chosen to put on our tax bills. So paying 3 times, now we've reduced 1 time.
Right, which always necessitates, I'm sorry, Mayor, which always necessitates me having to say this. We have been being charged 3 times for the same purpose. And those taxes, at some point, need to find their way back to the residents' pockets. It's been an unfair practice. I'm glad it's coming to an end. I hope the entire situation is resolved quickly. But whether it's the county who's been billing us year after year on our property taxes, or where that money comes from, the residents are owed money.
I also want to say I appreciate the movement of $197,000 to the housing fund. I think doing that provides transparency in regards to the cost of the resources within the town that are supporting that initiative.
Thank you. So, Ms. Bryson and members of council, the affiliated agency application process improvements, right? I would say the distribution and, the application, vetting, qualification, and distribution policy will be brought to Finance Administrative Committee in August with a potential town council date of September. And we're going to improve the same for ATAX. And I think that's important that I let you know that we are working on both. More of a procedural process improvement. I mean, we're not going to change the state law as it pertains to ATAX distribution, but what we do owe you, what I owe you, is an ability for you to receive the applications ahead of time, that the applicants, right, from the grant awards are aware, but also we start talking about the true distribution of ATAX as it relates to operating capital projects, housing, grant distribution to nonprofits, and some other things. So we have some work to do as soon as we get through budget for both. So I will say, and I don't want it to be lost on, right? Here's been our hard work and great work with something to show for it, is a reduction in operating costs of $1.2 million. That has nothing to do with property tax. It just simply has to do with some one-time, as well as scrubbing what we're using to operate, travel, training, some of the internal decisions we make. That was reduced. We are, however, increasing salaries and benefits 4.5%. And so in order to increase it, I'd say only 4.5%, we cut certain things out of our budget. We've reduced as much as we can in places that we're able to. We're also adding to the table, which the 4.5% is a new FTE, full-time equivalent of an integrated pest management person, community code enforcement for parking, and really someone's part-time job becoming a full-time job. That's an extra 7-ish hours a week added on there. You see our town position counts. We provide in this budget up to a 4% performance-based pay increase, 11% mandated, SC mandated medical insurance premium increase, life insurance increase, and workers' comp increase. It supports the 401k contribution. and supports the police officer's retirement. So when you add all of that up, I would say that because we're cutting, we were able to propose in a balanced budget 2 full-time people and still pay our great staff up to 4% performance-based. So if you add all that up, plus the mandate of the state, retirement, medical, and life insurance, whatnot, it equates to much more than 4.5% as an increase. However, we are bringing a budget forward, and I'm proud to do so. That is only a 4.5% increase here. Salaries and benefits remain the same as last year, just for today's sake. 14 holidays, 2 floating holidays. It allows employees to buy back 37.5 hours of accrued paid time off as long as they have a minimum balance in their PTO account. Fire rescue planned overtime reduces general fund overtime by $84,000, 6% decrease. And then some part-time and seasonal folks. I'm going to keep going unless I see questions. Operating, a 7% decrease. You can see in here what it includes itself in operating, right? We reduced where I just mentioned. And in the operating is the one-time LMO code amendments, comp plan amendments, and district plans that we're building in-house, but the contract really for LMO, class and comp study, Island Jams, Crescendo, Lantern Parade, RBC Heritage sponsorship, holiday lighting, matching funds for LCOG and the beach shuttle transportation, fire truck lease payments, office space lease payments. We put in the budget this year, and I believe I jumped over this at the first reading, $50,000 to invest in the removal. There's a process, right? But in the investment of the removal of abandoned boats once we deem them to be abandoned from our waterways. Just because they're there doesn't mean they're abandoned. We know that there's a process to go through. Bob's on top of it. $50,000 in our operating account to remove those high-risk vessels. We still have left. Yes, sir.
I got to say this. It has nothing to do with the budget, but there's a group of individuals out there that have been removing boats at their expense for years, and not to recognize them at this point in time would be a fault. So every year they're pulling out 10 boats. You know what? And they've raised their own funds to do it. So hopefully this will move in place of doing that, of them having to do that.
Yes, and I think we can compound what they do, right? Because do you remember, does Bob remember the name of the organization?
Okay, Foundation.
There we go.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir. What was interesting to me this year is I think the work they're doing is incredible. They're raising the dollars, not through government sources. But I do think that there have been a couple boats out there that we could help speed up if we had some dollars to put towards it. Yeah. So. We're still providing in the budget the $550 a month stipend for approximately 15 Beaufort County Sheriff's officers that live on the island. And we continue to provide the holiday bonuses for all Beaufort County Sheriff's Office employees who work south of the Broad. And so you can see the actual investment there. We're providing some dollars, $50,000 for a public safety department assessment, assuming and I'm anticipating that will prevail and remain in the strategic plan, as you talked about it at the strategic plan workshop. Contracted public safety, it eliminates Beaufort County Sheriff's Office, but there are still some other dollars in public safety, including security for our facilities and the dollars for overtime and events and certain things that we use. Affiliated agency partnerships, 11 applications received for a $3.2 million ask, 6 applications recommended for funding by the Finance Administrative Committee of $1.9 million. And the process procedure there was the F&A committee made that recommendation directly to me for inclusion in the budget. And as recommended is what you see in in the budget. I'll share those details with you in the next slide.
And-
And then transfers out to housing we talked about.
Mayor, I was going to say, before you move to that next slide, I think it's important to point out, and Mr. Orlando did point out, public safety assessment comes out of our strategic plan workshop. And when we see these kind of expenditures in the budget, it matches what we've identified as our key strategies. So public safety is one of those we identified, and so here's the money being spent for that. The previous slide showed the emphasis on growth management with the LMO rewrite and also district planning. And we will see when we get to the capital expenditures tomorrow, more of that emphasis on carrying out the strat plan, because your strat plan and your budget expenditures should match each other. And we're doing that. And I think that's very important thanks to Mr. Orlando and his team for matching that. And when we see the stormwater fund later, you'll see that we identified that as another one of our strategies. So remember those key elements, strat plan to budget, and being reflected in this proposal.
Thank you. Affiliated agency recommendations that appear in the FY26 budget proposal of 1.988 million. Island Recreation Association, Coastal Discovery, Mitchellville Preservation Project, LRTA Palmetto Breeze, Beaufort County Economic Development Corporation, and Sea Turtle Patrol, HHI, make up for those requests.
Just a question on the note at the bottom where it says that money was approved in fiscal year 2024 for Habitat and Coastal Community Development Corporation, but was not spent or earned, and it was carried forward to fiscal year 2025. Where are we on that?
We have distributed the funds for Habitat for Humanity. They have acquired a piece of property, and we have, right, so when we worked through the MOA to make sure that they were compliant with the town council agreed to terms, we've transferred those dollars. Habitat is in process right now working with our team to establish a site plan and building style, architectural style, and small house plans for their project. Separately, we've transferred the $600,000 to the Coastal Community Development Corporation in that same light. That was more of a payment once we've deemed the MOA to be compliant. So dollars distributed, legal review to make sure that those MOAs were adhered to as approved by town council, and $1.1 million invested between the two. Expenditure highlights, with the exception of speakers, we are broadcasting 110 meetings a year. Town council, community service, public safety, finance, administrative committees, right? The subcommittees of town council, but then also planning commission, our Gullah Geechee Preservation Task Force, Land and Cultural Preservation Task Force, our Gullah Geechee Historic Neighborhoods CDC, ATAX, and Housing Action Committee. And again, I mentioned at first reading, sometimes I'm asked, can we do more? Can we do more meetings? Can we do this extra? We can. There's a cost to it, but then there's also a capacity to it with Beaufort County. So, but this year in the budget, $48,000, more or less, $48,000 for 110 meetings, and it's through the Beaufort County channel, and we have a operating agreement with Beaufort County to provide the service and pay for the service. Other expenditure highlights, well, I won't go through every single detail here because there's a lot to go. It supports fire rescue. There's significant increased calls for service over time. It supports the fleet management, public safety, our short-term rental program, all of that work we're doing the expenditures are coming from the appropriate accounts, right? So in public safety, when we say it supports the short-term rental program, those revenue dollars are attached and understood to be used for and from, I should say, short-term rental permits. So short-term rental permitting is, for the most part, supporting the entire public safety department. Public safety hours, 8 to 9, 7 days a week. We've scaled our shifts to match for that. When those additional revenues came in, we were able to expand shifts and due to extra people. Supports the annual security contract, supports our finance department, human resources department. We have a tuition reimbursement program here, as well as professional development, customer service, hospitality, cultural awareness, leadership development training, all in the operating account. We reduced software and technology costs by streamlining our technology this year by close to $80,000. It's not always a favorable decision. Everybody over time seems to want and like their own software, but a great job by Tom Sunday and Sean Leiniger and everyone involved to reduce that software, $80,000. Supports facilities, a lot more of what you've seen, all right? Landscaping, lighting, solid waste, recycling, park maintenance. We recycle, and I think we go above and beyond any past year of recycling at our beaches. And I'd say especially our contract with I2, but I really say too because Sean Leiniger goes down there and checks on the weekends, and Derek cares about it like it's his entire own program with TJ involved. We've invested in it, and I think we're starting to pay some dividends with that investment. And again, all of that work is in our operating budget, supported by the revenues and expenditures I shared with you. We will have a town-wide litter patrol contract in place. Is it in place yet this fiscal, Sean? I know it's close.
This fiscal, it's out to bid now.
It's out to bid right now? Okay. That's a public service announcement for a good contractor. We just need a pickup truck and someone who can see some details, helping us above and beyond our landscape contract details. So it's a great opportunity for a small business to get involved. Right-of-way maintenance, beach services, franchise agreement is supported through this budget. And it really supports, I would say, the state's very first organic first integrated pest management policy. We have a couple of edits to make to the policy. Derek's been running with the program. We're learning as we go, and it supports it. Supports our planning community development department, mostly the LMO, as well as staff improvements or staff training and building safety plan review contract. It supports transportation, our marketing and communications department, all of our work out of Natalie and Angie and everybody in the Office of Cultural Affairs, Community Engagement. And those are the higher level items that the budget supports. So we have 4 more to go. Should I keep going?
Keep going. Was there any questions or comments? I don't see any. Oh, Ms. Becker?
I'll just make a comment because I think it's worthy of doing so. As you heard all of those items that Mark, you just presented, or at least as I heard them, I hope other heard them the same way. Our town is doing remarkable things. It is moving in the direction that the residents have asked for, and we're doing it all while being fiscally responsible. And I know I've said it before, just highlighting it since comments weren't forthcoming, and I thought one was needed, that this is a good job, and I'm excited by this budget and all of the efforts that it supports.
Thank you. Thank you. And that's great to hear. Not just me. I hear it, but I think that you're going to hear the department heads that are watching this year, because they came to the table this year ready to cut. But I will say that I'm proud to work with them, because where they wouldn't cut or where they wouldn't bend is service delivery. And so I think a lot of the culture here that we're talking about up here is service delivery. So debt service. We don't need to spend a lot of time on this, but debt service of $18.8 million, property tax revenue. So sources of revenue are property taxes, investment income, beach preservation fees, and that's the fund balance of the beach preservation fee, and then hospitality fees. You can see that the majority of the fund budget revenues this year are from beach preservation for obvious reasons. And the expenditures planned are $7.3 million additional payment to principal, 1.6 to interest, small amount in bank fees. Anticipated debt costs, we know that we talked about at first reading, and I've talked with all of you 1 and 2 at a time, is that there are additional funds in the debt service fund that need to be anticipated for utilization this year. And so while we've kept this in past years, 1.6 last year, I would say and admit we didn't get to it for obvious, well, maybe less obvious reasons, but I would say William Hilton Parkway and other priorities that have kept us busy, parking as one other example. We have not brought forward any opportunity to discuss anticipating debt, simply because we've been wrapping our minds around the beach preservation, right? And so we're close. We have a strategy in place. In the budget, it's calling for 100% funds, but we have a strategy that's based somewhere between 70-30 and 60-40 of debt, of cash to debt distribution. It's going to be closer to 60-40. We've got the bids in. We are under budget in our bids, but we don't have a contract yet for me to be confident to say to you, we've saved some dollars. I'm proud of this guy over here, Sean Leiniger and Jeff Netzinger and the whole team to really understand each proposal and make sense of it so that we have the right contractor, but also the right funding strategy.
Mayor, I'm sorry, can you back up one slide, Mark, the revenues on debt service? Yeah, that one. So you see property taxes about 6 million. If you look at the actual budget ordinance, then we set a separate millage rate for debt service from operating. So if for those who are down and looking in the weeds like I do, you'll see that we have to separate our millage rates to establish both of those. And that's where the property tax portion comes in, is from that particular item set forth in, those who want to see it, section 2 of the budget ordinance.
Thank you. Thank you.
I had a question regarding the 2.4 million. I was just trying to understand how the anticipated debt costs added up to that amount. Because when I look at the slides coming up about the beach renourishment costs associated with funding, it was 225,000 plus there was an underwriting discount. I mean, it was very small. So I'm just trying to understand what's the difference between that cost and the 2.4 that's up there.
You want to?
Yes, so
I'll
that
jump in.
amount includes not only the potential 60-40 or 70-30 for beach renourishment, it also incorporates the costs associated with removing the additional funds that is right now sitting in the debt service fund. So we're talking about 2 different issues. One is, again, the beach renourishment, and then the other one is what we call the exit debt service fund. So we're looking at those 2, and the costs associated with issuing bonds or issuing any debt, those 2, that's the amount of 2.
Okay, so I get the beach renourishment one. I did not understand the second.
So the second piece, we have $14-15 million sitting in our debt service now. That is money that the only way, and this is by statute, the only way we can remove that $14 or $15 million out of the debt service is by actually issuing debt. So the way to do it is issuing bonds, and then that could be a short-term issuance, potentially about 6 to 12 months. And then the cost associated with doing that process is included in that 2.4.
We
We,
haven't identified where,
pardon me?
have we identified where we think we're going to be using that $14 million from our balance? Is that going to be part of the beach renourishment funding, or is that for something else?
It could be used for that. And we talked a little bit about that. You've got to pull it out of there and use it. But we also talked about utilizing it potentially for some land acquisition, not to talk about any specific pieces of property in the room. But I know that the town council, at least the majority of you, have had some ask of me to look into 1 or 2 pieces of property. I would suggest that if that is still the goal, that source of money is ideal for that. Does that make sense? We can talk about this more. This is what this is for. It's great questions.
That makes sense.
Okay.
Thank you for the clarification.
You're welcome.
Yeah, just sort of some high-level comments on debt service when it comes to our municipality. You know, obviously, Mr. Lynn is going to take a little deeper dive as to what we currently owe. I think personally, we all may try to thrive to be debt-free. But when we start to look at revenue streams that are coming in, and then weigh that against the capacity of work that has to continue for us to stay relevant, for us to stay within a quality of life that we all expect. Debt service is simply a tool to help us get there. Okay, and I think that's important for us to sort of lead with that, because you mentioned land acquisition. That's just one thing that's in front of us. We talked further a little later today about stormwater, and we realized what's been happening over the last few days. The stormwater fee will not be able to cover what we need to do long term. So as a mindset from a community standpoint, again, I think debt service and us being in the predicament that we are in, to have a very, very strong bond rating, the ability to pay it off, we should use this tool to make sure that Hilton Head stays best in class.
Mr. Brown, may I add something too? As a town, we need to be thinking of for the fund strategy. And that fund strategy consists of not only looking at the cash that we have on hand, but also looking at potentially debt issuance in the future, potentially any new tax increment financing that we may want to do with other partners. So there's a lot of different things that we need to consider as we start thinking about what we need to do as a town.
Mr. Manager, we are planning on taking that up in workshop later in the year, so that we all can start to get our heads wrapped around this long term, correct?
Yes, sir. In a few different places. I think one, contemplating it when we talk strategic plan in June and July as you adopt it, but then also, I think it's the July, August, September. I always forget the months we have them lined up, but it's in this one right here. We're going to have a stormwater utility program workshop where we can talk about all the work, all the thoughts you have compared to the direction we're going, because I think it's what I'm truly anticipating is a course correction of what we're working on, and from a prioritization standpoint. I also know that we're going to have a capital improvement program workshop. And when we start talking capital projects based upon just cash flow, reserves, we're going to have to talk about one of two things, right? Which direction are we going in? Are we going to slow down investment? Or are we going to borrow for those important projects that you all have an idea about? Fire rescue headquarters is one. Some land acquisition above and beyond real estate transfer fee is the other. I would say we're in good shape here because we've been very frugal over the last bunch of years, and I'm going to show you how much debt was paid off. We're finally getting in that position again to be, I wouldn't say debt free, but surplus revenues well above and beyond anything we were anticipating. Right? There's surplus millage here if we don't borrow simply because we've paid so much debt off and we have a decision to make. It's a workshop, I mind saying it out loud, you have a decision. You either reduce millage in your debt service or you borrow it for what you all believe as your priority. And if the priority is a significant land acquisition or fire rescue headquarters or something in between, I think it's time to have those conversations.
Yeah, and I like to say that it's a priority and reinvestment in your community to make certain that you're staying current or, ahead of the curve. So.
Okay.
Yeah, if I could compare it to owning a house. So if you go along and you keep paying down your mortgage, and you go like, wow, this is really great. I'm almost ready to pay off my mortgage. And I'm like, but you know what? My garage is falling in. So should I just let that fall in? And I won't have to spend any more money on the garage, and I'll continue to pay off my mortgage. So instead, why don't we fix the garage? And even if we have to borrow a little bit more money, because we'll continue to have a garage. I mean, I use a garage as a comparison, but you can use some other elements of a house to think about that. But that's what we're thinking about, is making sure that we continue to invest in what we value and to protect what we value. And sometimes, and I know there's a slide coming up. I was going to say, I'm looking forward to the slide to show that over 7 years, we have continually paid down our debt. And that puts us in great stead with the bond rating agency. So it's a conversation we'll have sometime later this year about what do we see that our needs and what we think we want to do and how do we fund them.
Last but not least, this budget also calls for expenditures, a one-time expenditure of callable bond, the beach preservation bond, as we know it, close to $7.5 million, paying off the residual remaining principal and interest. So with all that being said, a portion of the millage decrease is in debt service property tax, reduced from 5.5 to 5.1. So all of the millage that we've reduced was not in operating. Some of it is in debt for the decisions you've made. $116.1 million of debt. So principal payment reduction between FY18 and FY25. I think that's an incredible accomplishment. An additional $14.8 million debt reduction this fiscal year. That's just based upon our scheduled payments as well as our callable bonds. And the callable bonds are the beach preservation fee, bonds of, where is it? There's 7.5 and 3.9. Beach renourishment, as I said, budgeted at 100, but post budget adoption, I will bring to you the game plan once we have a negotiated contract of paying for and funding the beach renourishment. I will say that it's most likely going to be the smallest amount borrowed at the highest cost of project ever. And so I think that, again, we're making some good decisions with using we're very blessed using the fund balance of beach preservation fee, and they're really offsetting a lower debt than ever, than in a long time, I should say. Right here, this is what we talked about. The debt service fund balance currently has a $14.8 million surplus. A short-term bond issuance may be considered to draw these funds in 26, and I do recommend that we do that. All the bonds issued after Hurricane Matthew have been fully repaid. We're improving our financial position, decreasing debt, increasing reserves, and increasing assessed values. You can't ask for any more than that. That's tremendous. And then what you don't see in here is stormwater bonds are paid through the stormwater fund. We just went through that. It's just kind of a different look at it. Here are all of our bonds, outstanding issues, and so you start seeing your balance after $47.75 million balance after fiscal year 26. So by no means are we paying off all our debt. We still have a lot of debt to be concerned about that rely upon property tax and special sources of revenue. Hospitality, beach preservation will be paid off, those two bonds, callable, and then stormwater bonds. But you're starting to see where we can start looking at programs, stormwater bonds, $700,000 left. So I think we need to talk about what your goals are for stormwater, and then see what dollars are available from a revenue standpoint and an expenditure standpoint, as well as fund balance. So I love this slide. It's almost my favorite slide, where you show from 2018 fiscal year and at 64.
Since, Mayor, since there's a pause, I just want to go back to Mark's favorite slide. And since I was on council from the beginning of that downward trend, want to say that was the result of some very careful planning and some very good advice. And during some times when there was a bit of economic uncertainty, not that unlike today. And so as I hear discussions about debt and moving forward, certainly there is a conversation to be had there. But that uncertainty and that financial conservative position that we've always taken has always kept us in good stead while the island has continued to grow, prosper, and improve. So as long as we continue down that policy framework, I think that we need, well, I should just say we should remember that policy framework. Thank you.
That's the truth. So these slides are in here. Well, zero to do with the budget. I put them in here because I know that we're setting up the budget for a big decision to enter into a negotiated contract with a beach renourishment contractor, less than $47.5 million. I believe when we were at the workshop, we talked a lot about a split between debt and cash position in the investment. And we put these up here simply to let you know, one, we are still looking through scenario one, cash funded 70, debt funded 30. We have increased, as proposed in the budget, the expectation for a fund balance minimum. Right now it's 12. We've proposed a budget policy that's an attachment to the ordinance of the budget, as well as in all your staff report and up here as well, from 12 to 20. And so both of these slides show a minimum fund balance expectation of 12 or from 12 to 20, but they show different fund balance cash positions at the end of 26, anticipating this year's revenue, wherever it is up there, added estimation of revenues for beach preservation of 13.6 this year. So we're going to bring this to you for full disclosure in an ordinance coming through finance committee, coming to town council by ordinance in the next couple months. Yeah, here we go. F&A committee, finance and administrative committee, end of July. I think that's the new revised July date, or that's the real July date. And then first reading August, second reading September. And at that point, we'll be able to bid and bond the project. In the meantime, it was a good question that somebody asked me. In the meantime, what do you do? Well, in the meantime, we have cash in our budget. So please have the confidence that we have the full cash value in our budget for use of cash, and then we have the confidence to enter into a contract for that amount. So we can move forward on that before we bring forward a funding strategy, moral strategy. Okay. Well, stormwater. I'm just gonna keep moving. This work is good pace, good tempo. All right. Conversation. FY26 budget, $11.1 million total revenue projection, 5.2 coming from stormwater utility fees, a growth of 4%. Prior year funds, 5.5%. a use of prior year funds 49%, but you can see that over time, we weren't using prior year fund balances. We were simply working as fast as we can to keep up. I would say that some decisions that were made in prior years, last few years, one with Jeff Metzinger driving the bus with his foot on the gas pedal, I think's helped. But I also think that we are getting better at project delivery and anticipating how to build a project. I would just say that. So you'll see that in prior years, the fund balance grew to an excessive amount, and we're starting to utilize those fund balance reserves. $1.8 million this year more than last.
And Mayor, I'm sorry, while you're there, Mark, on that slide, the utility fees, that's not an increase in the stormwater fee, is that correct?
Correct. Thank you. That's a great point. The rate remains the same. That's part of the highlights, but I might as well say that a few times. The rate remains the same. The revenues are just increasing just due to natural growth. It remains at $150 as that rate. It's the highest. It's the highest if you stack it on the deck in our region. But I would say that I think that our program investment is an excessive amount more than, especially with these, I would call them system operating agreements with these private partners. Expenditures, $11.1 million. You see salary and benefits, an 8% increase, operating decrease of 4%. And so what you'll see in salaries and benefits is simply natural growth based upon 4% and the state mandates that I talked about in general fund. And you can see a decrease almost across the board, but you will also see $11.1 million. Salary and benefits and operating more or less are remaining the same. Monitoring, a little less than prior year, but back on par with years prior. Inventory modeling, routine maintenance, pump station maintenance, interest fees, transfers out to general fund we talked about, and transfers out to capital projects, $6.3 million. You can see that a significant portion of our budget is transferred out to capital projects compared to other funds. 57% of the stormwater utility fund revenues are transferred out to CIP. So a 4% increase. We talked about prior year funds. We mentioned it's just planned for stormwater fund balance use for capital projects. Investment income, more or less flat. Plan review fees, an 4% increase projected. Salaries and benefits, we talked about 4% covers workers' comp and medical. Operating decreased. Monitoring is a 43% decrease. Quarterly water quality monitoring, tide and weather monitoring have been transferred to the CIP budget along with projects. So what we're doing is starting to attach some of that to projects. We're spending more, so don't let any of this fool you with numbers decreasing. Increasing and inventory and modeling, excuse me. We're doing the resilience study, the resilience plan, as well as modeling Lawton Basin, Baynard Cove Basin inventory and modeling. POA systems and public systems corrective maintenance. We're moving that into projects, so bear with me for a second on that. It's just showing up on the budget as a decrease. Routine maintenance and contingency, again, most of what we're looking at are projects. So we're keeping the maintenance dollars in the maintenance account, and a lot of what we're starting to work on are bigger lift projects that qualify by state code as a capital project.
Where does the county, and I know we'll have this conversation later this summer, but for the purpose of today, so people are aware, where does the conversations with the county in their stormwater on the island stand?
Okay.
Later.
Yes, I think that one, I think it's case by case, right? I would say that the neighborhood, Sean, remind me of the neighborhood they just invested in.
Bay
Bay
Pines.
Pines.
Bay Pines, Point Comfort, I was going to say, but Bay Pines. They've done a tremendous job. If you haven't been over there to take a look at it, I think that was performed well by county staff. Y'all have taken your site visits. We've taken the site visit. They've performed work in that area and where that natural outflow is going very, very well. And so I think they're doing a great job. I think, frankly, I think that we have so much stormwater on our island that we've had some deferred maintenance issues on that is going to take us a decade to catch up with it. And so I think the county, one, they're doing a great job. Can they do a better job? Every day we wake up and say we're going to do a better job. We can do a much better job as well. They're outperforming us if you only look at that project. But we are building pump stations in Wexford, in Sea Pines. We're spending our dollars and time on those projects. And then we also have our operating agreements with the private systems, right? And that's a full-time and then some job in and of itself. So I think we've heard you loud and clear as a council. Stormwater is a very, very high priority to figure out. We have some work to show you when we come to workshop with it.
Yeah, I just want the community to understand that that is part of the narrative that we're all addressing to make certain that as we go forward, that stormwater is a big part of that conversation and the county, and that's how we work together.
I'll say this, honest assessment is not about the county. I think all of us need to do a better job with managing our stormwater.
May I jump in for just a second? So, yes, you're right. The Bay Pines work that was done this morning was flowing nicely. The work in that area that hasn't been done is, as expected, backed up and causing its own difficulties. Question I have is, we all pay stormwater fees, and there's a great amount of work. The stormwater department in Hilton Head is phenomenal. Those who work in it are second to none. I'm impressed every time I talk to any of them. But it's the communities that don't get any service because their streets and their easements are owned by the county. And I will give Councilman Reitz, I do it all the time, Councilman Reitz some credit. He is coming out to areas that I've identified that are owned by the county and beginning to bring the county representatives to look at those so that they, after decades, start to get some attention. But I just wonder, in terms of the monies that get collected by residents who aren't on the town system but are paying into the town funds, what expectation they can have. I know that, or you all know, that I'm forever saying that we should own our roads, because if we own our roads, then we can work on these issues. And I realize there is a calculation to be made there in terms of cost and the rest. But I don't want to leave without making it again noted that there are areas of the island that don't get the attention that they're paying for. And we need to have that conversation sooner rather than later, because while we're all kind of aware of the rain today and we're happy about the section of Bay Pines that's working well, there are areas that I drove around this afternoon that are flooding that no one seems to take responsibility for. And so I want it to again to be noted and highlighted that we have to figure out how to make that work happen regardless of who owns it. So I'm not sure if that was clear enough, but we do need to work either closely with the county and taking those roads over so our good staff can do the good work, and for them to give us the money they've been collecting and not utilizing to make it happen, or the town with the money that they're collecting also needs to come out and address those issues for those people who are currently having a problem as I speak.
Since the county has done such a nice job with stormwater in Bay Pines, does that qualify for us to consider them for urging additional work?
I thought when I got through the general fund, it was downhill. It was easy. Yeah, yes, absolutely. I think that, I think some of us being at the table with the county have to ask those questions, what is it they're willing to do versus us? I'm writing some notes here. What we will show you when we come to the workshop in a month or two for stormwater, we moved capital projects and stormwater, so I forget what the schedule is right this second. But what I think will help with all of this is to show you a full collection of revenues for the SWU dollars, total collection, right? So what is Hilton Head Islands portion collected? What's the Beaufort County right up there? You saw that there was a rate attached to it. Right, that's Hilton Head Island, but when you look at the tax bill, there's some administrative cost on that tax bill from the county. So we'll show you all in, and then really try to get to the bottom of use of funds. We know what our use of funds are, but they're doing a lot more work than their rates collecting. So some work I'll do with this county administrator.
Just to sort of add to the conversation, just so they know. First of all, let me say we're trending in the right direction. Stormwater bubbled up as a priority for us in the workshop, the strategic planning workshop. We're staying true to the invest in what you value, with a significant amount of money being transferred to the capital improvement fund to deal with stormwater. And I'm understanding that at the staff level between the town and the county, there are now better coordination is going on. There will be some angst, however, when you start to present to us all stormwater utility fees, us and contribution to the county, because the county is looking at it from a very broad perspective, not Hilton Head centric. To deal with some of that angst, I'm just wondering if it's a good idea to try to introduce the TIF conversation as well, because there are areas on Hilton Head that we've said have been neglected as far as routine maintenance is concerned. And once you neglect for a decade or so, it's no longer maintenance, it's now a capital improvement situation. So I just wanted to plant that seed moving forward. Obviously, there are lots of areas on the Hilton Head that are not getting the return on the investment when it comes to what we're putting in. Realizing the conditions, we'll see how we can fast forward chunks of money to start tackling.
Okay.
Mayor, if I could add to the conversation, you have a slide coming up, I know, that shows a map of the island and the stormwater systems. And I said at public hearing that I've been advocating for a number of years now to have, and I said a statewide stormwater system. I said, no, that would be a good idea, but I mean island-wide. And I think it'd be good if we could look at that map, if you could pull that on up. And it shows POA systems and then other systems covered by agreements with POAs. And then it shows areas where they're like county roads and state roads, et cetera, and town roads. And I think it would be good for our workshop to clearly identify the areas, maybe segments of that map where perhaps there are county roads or county stormwater systems, and say, here's areas of issues with stormwater and here's who owns them, so that we understand where the problem areas are. I know your staff has a great idea of where those areas are, but I think it would be good for us to see those and to see who's responsible for those, and then figure out what we can do about that if the responsibility is not being met.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure we'll tackle that this summer when we bring this back to a workshop.
That's the plan, and we talked about Bay Pines. It's no hiding behind the fact that the Bay Pines community is an interesting one, where the town, to Ms. Bryson's point, the town has some responsibility over there and owns right of way and manages a system. The county manages right of way and system. And then there's I wouldn't say unknown, is the private, right? So while we're collecting the rate, the county's fixing the left side of the road, we're fixing the right, and it's just been like that forever. And there's several of those examples, several. We can talk every single neighborhood. There's several examples. I see Miss Becker smiling. You know, Bradley Beach Road is the example. Us calling the county to fix or improve stormwater. Let's not even talk about the potholes, but the stormwater system is just us asking them, and we're right back to where we started a year later sometimes. So what I appreciate about this is I think that, one, we have a great leader in the department with Jeff Netzinger. We miss Scott. He's through the years. Netzinger has taken over. He's the project manager on the beach renourishment. He truly understands. He's a civil, but we're not contractors, right? We're not contractors in-house. And I think the county added a lot of value to that in that Bay Pines areas, in that Bay Pine area. Just keep moving forward. So budget's laying out the work we're doing though this year, which I think's considerable. Pond maintenance of 55 town ponds, street sweeping, routine channel maintenance, pump station maintenance, 4 pump stations that we maintain. It's a decrease, but still a considerable investment, and depreciation, amortization, interest, and fees as expenditure highlights. Transfers out to general fund, 350 we talked about. $6.3 million to CIP. So new is the transfer from stormwater to CIP. Corrective maintenance projects, active drainage agreement, partner corrective maintenance reimbursements. Sean, is that the $2 million, Sean?
Yes.
That's not anywhere else on here? I'd have had a number, so forgive me.
The total between for the POA program that's in the FY26 budget is $3.8 million.
Okay.
In the CIP, now in the CIP.
So 2 million reimbursable to our partner, 1.8 projects of ours.
So projects that we're going to take on behalf of POAs. And then all the other projects that are in there that comprise the $6 million
Right.
are our projects.
Okay. And so we can start diving into that a lot more in the workshop, but let's be fair about this. In the past, we have qualified projects, whether they're high or low on the list has been a staff level responsibility. And I think our team does a great job, but there are some folks out there that are asking for reimbursement of project with stormwater utility revenue, fund balance or not. And we haven't been as quick to respond and reimburse as some of those private partners would like us to be. This year, there are more dollars in the reimbursement account than any year prior. And we want to be much more, I would say, responsive / aggressive to reimburse for those dollars. We would rather the private entity who's our partner doing the work where we can reimburse them quicker with more dollars at stake and not tell them, well, your project qualifies. It doesn't qualify high enough for us to reimburse you this year because we don't have enough dollars. So the tactical fix is on the screen, but in the works. It doesn't take away from our own projects. Keep in mind, the stormwater utility fund through the fund balance contribution is more than last year. We're still in the LMO compliance and MS4 permitting business. Inventory modeling, routine maintenance, pump station monitoring, corrective maintenance are part of that. Maybe I went backwards, but pond management, street sweeping, channel maintenance, our resilience initiative. We're still working on the resilience plan. We will provide that to you in draft format closer to the end of the year, very early into next year at the latest.
There's
Ms.
the
Bryson, I
map.
believe this is the map you were
That's
talking
the map.
about. Great memory. But you can see our projects are distributed. Sorry, that's a little blurry on this screen, but you can see the extent of our system. Town right-of-ways, easements, town property, and what's not jumping out is what y'all are talking about: state, county, and private property. We won't dive too much in here today because we can talk a lot about this in the stormwater portfolio, so to speak, the stormwater program of the CIP that we're going to talk about tomorrow, but a $6.3 million capital improvement transfer to CIP. And what this does, just for full transparency, it lists every single project with the dollars associated with it, whether it's Jarvis Creek Outfall, Bryant Road, Old Woodlands, monitoring, whatnot. And again, those are transferred to CIP for tomorrow.
Mayor, just a quick note before we move on to the next fund, and that is the stormwater aspects and the resilience aspects are two of those identified as part of our strat plan.
And may I just ask for an update sometime, not now, but this week, next week, on Moonshell Road? What's going on over there?
Yes. Sean, are you doing that?
That'll be talked about tomorrow.
Okay.
Tomorrow.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. We'll address that tomorrow. Just
Thank you.
Gullah Geechee Historic Neighborhoods Community Development Corporation Fund. So Mr. Boxley sitting at the table with us. Thomas, thank you. And you're doing a fabulous job leading the organization and really working with our team here. Jump in. So really just jump in anytime, but I can get through most of the slides. But for everyone's sake and a reminder, this is a new fund that was established fiscal year 23. It's used to account for the entire costs of the Gullah Geechee Historic Neighborhoods Community Development Corporation. We know what the corporation quality of life goals and objectives are: encouraging entrepreneurialism, preventing gentrification, assisting in business attraction, expansion, retention, providing land and development assistance, pursuing affordable housing opportunities, identifying infrastructure needs, and providing critical financial opportunities. The primary, and so I would say these components here are baked into the bylaws of the corporation, the strategic plan of the corporation. It's managed by Executive Director Thomas Boxley, and it has a board of directors that Town Council has appointed over time. But as we started in fiscal 23, you placed a board of directors, and they were very involved with recruiting and hiring executive director. Primary sources of revenue, as I mentioned, are state and county grants, and you can see where they are. This year, the revenues are as Mr. Boxley and the board have planned. I'll probably say a couple times, this budget was proposed by Thomas to the board, and the board back to Thomas and to me. And once the budget is adopted, they will more or less ratify, agree to their budget. The dollars, however, they're not coming from the revenue sources that I just mentioned. They're coming from prior year South Carolina grant. It was $5 million. There's still a fund reserve of these dollars, so please know we didn't use all of those dollars, but Thomas is programming a revenue matching with expenditures this year on what he needs, not just the full amount, and carrying a reserve that is accruing interest. So the budget's starting and the revenues are starting to make sense.
So much. They allow me to been operating since 2023. Council, we've been taking a very conservative approach to spending. We are, if you will, at this particular point in time, ramping up and preparing to get into the meat and potatoes of our strategic plan. As you know, we have two members of our board, registered town council members. So thank you, Mayor Perry, for joining us a couple of months ago. And thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Brown, for your ongoing support of the community, your community, physical integration. Some of the things that we are gearing up to accomplish this year, and I will say, we just had a real robust discussion about stormwater. I see representatives from the meeting here today, thank you all for being here as well. But there are several stormwater related issues in the developed communities. Councilwoman Becker, I was riding the other day as well, and looking on Marshall Road and looking at some of the drainage issues that exist there, as well as over in the Spanish Wells community. So, you know, as we move forward, please keep in mind that some of our historic neighborhoods really need the support and the budgetary support to match the stormwater related issues that exist. But as we move forward, some of the things that we are working to accomplish in this coming fiscal year are continued support of business growth and development. We would like to see more government-owned businesses that are able to take advantage of the tourism industry. I see two business owners here today that generate a significant amount of revenue from tourism. So we would like to see that expanded through the offering of business for services. Last year, we embarked upon a financial education program. We named the series Money Talks, but we wouldn't provide required financial education workshop. We'll continue that this year, and we would also, you know, as you see listed in our budget, we would like to begin to offer funds for small business growth and development for potential business owners, as well as looking at ways that we can support individuals that are looking to develop their property, look at ways that they might create revenue streams within the land that they have owned. So those are some of the pieces that we look to accomplish this year. We are also in the process in the final stages of a cultural tourism enhancement program that we have termed Wayfind. And we have identified 7 locations around town in phase 1. And we'll expand upon that in a phase 2 that will highlight the religious institutions as well as the developed cemeteries as a means by which to tie back to the cultural significance of the island as we look to again to build upon the tourism experience for our visitors to the island. So that I'll sit here and allow for any questions to you.
Not a question, just a comment. I'm glad that Mr. Foxy mentioned that it was a strategic plan that was developed and adopted by the board of directors of the CDC. Mr. Orlando is correct that there will be a fund balance here after this proposed budget. Not a lot, though. I think one of the key components of this is a development corporation. And it is a development corporation under the auspices of the town of Hilton. And to date, the town has not contributed any funds to this particular endeavor. However, if we are looking to have the CDC sustain and fulfill its mission, I think we as a council need to be bold as we start to consider potentially maybe some assets so that the CDC can operate. Okay, we have purchased land within the community that has been set aside for development. There's infrastructure needs that could potentially help in the historic neighborhoods as well to sort of spur this sort of not gentrification, but development within the historic community and maintaining the same character. So today I'm simply planting a seed as we are adopting a budget that the town didn't necessarily put any meat into because it came from the state and the county. But moving forward, I think we need to be very mindful that there are assets and opportunities for us to invest to make sure that this works.
Mayor, I support the idea of looking at our assets to assist with the CDC. I've been inquiring about property that we own, which is sitting there and could be used for the development purposes to assist the Gullah community. And I would ask if we could have the manager take a look at those possibilities for us to consider at a workshop in the near future. In addition to that, the inquiry I have is, I mentioned this at the public hearing, is that Senator Davis had proposed to provide some annual allocations for the CDC in addition to the initial $5 million. And I think he was mentioning $1 million. I know that the legislature just adjourned, signed a day on May 8th, but is going to come back because they didn't reach a resolution on the budget. So do we know if in the proposed budget there is additional funding for the Gullah Geechee Historic Neighborhoods Community Development Corporation? How was that? I said the whole thing.
You did, you got it right.
I'm not aware of any now. Please know I've had several significant conversations with Senator Davis and other delegation members, but I have not heard an update on this year's budget at this time.
I think it'd be good for us to check in on that. And I know that there's a conference committee that's been appointed and that the legislature will come back into session to try to reach an agreement on the budget in the near future. So I think it'd be good for us to follow up on that.
We're very proactive in that, so please know that. I appreciate your direction, but please know we are extremely proactive in searching for, identifying, obtaining, and following up on those dollars, and we will, because there's other dollars on the table as well that we've asked for.
We are consistently researching through the department, through the finance department with Michelle and Beyonce to look for other revenue streams that we can potentially tap into. Part of this first year and a half has been infrastructure building, so we have had to make sure that we are prepared to receive funds. So we're currently registered. We have done some Brad Street registration and 501c3 status officially. So we are poised to receive funds, from other sources as we move forward.
So that being said, and to everybody's point, South Carolina was ARPA funds transferred. I should say South Carolina was the $5 million, and then Beaufort County were the Beaufort County contribution. I would call it a good municipal neighbor fund they created and transferred to us several $100,000 in the Beaufort County grant and investment income. Expenditures, matching revenues, so personnel, benefits, operating, professional services, grants and loans, capital outlay, and project expenses and contingency. I won't go through that too fast, but we do have some highlights to share with you. You can see those expenditures. But brought forward by Thomas, budget is approved by the board of directors, or endorsed by the board of directors, in March. We talked about salaries and benefits, a reduction of operating across the board and CDC included. And then professional services, a decrease, but grant funded, wayfinding, technology and signage, some legal fees, services for property owners in the William Hilton Parkway corridor, land appraisals to support the evaluation of property for purchase, architecture, engineering, design, permitting, and Low Country Gullah consulting services. I think more for heirs property assistance and some other things. A program that has not launched, but the dollars are in here for grants and incentive loans straight back into the people in neighborhoods. So again, those are grant dollars, and Thomas and his board are working on that program. Small business development as well, second series of money talks, small business lending, potentially real estate lending. Capital outlay in the budget is $1.2 million, up to $1.2 million for acquisition of site for this Community Development Corporation main office and other components. And then project expenses general contingency. So with that, that's the CDC fund, again, from the board to Thomas, Thomas to me, us today. Housing fund. We have a housing fund that more or less is the same as last year, a $3.9 million source of revenues. The chief housing officer transferred from general fund, state aid tax, prior year housing funds, and prior year funds from ARPA. Those are the revenues. What you will notice is the obvious is a structured source of revenue into the housing program. That has come up with all of you last year and even some of our conversations leading up to first reading about finding a stable, or I would say some sustainable source of annual revenue into the housing fund. This is not proposed as such. For expenditures, the $1 million set aside, and that's the ARPA funds right here. We finally have the land disturbance permit, the development agreements in place, a really good draft of the ground lease. And I do anticipate that this be the year that we expend those first dollars on the page towards our North Point public-private partnership. A reminder, it's 160 units, 1, 2, 3 bedroom, between 60 and 150 of the area median income for rent. As a requirement, working on Hilton Head Island to qualify to live at North Point. A Muddy Creek Neighborhood Stabilization Capital Program account of $1.5 million. So that's for some road repair, sidewalk, lighting, stop signs, crosswalk, stormwater, and some of that local neighborhood, community development capital investment. While nothing was spent last year, we are geared up. We had a neighborhood meeting. We've started to pair out what those capital projects are and how to prioritize those. And we will bring those forward when we talk about CIP at our upcoming workshop. Bryant Road, public-private partnership, and in the same light that North Point is coming forward when we have our housing workshop with you. Mayor and Council, this staff will propose to you a similar public-private partnership, probably more leaning towards homeownership than rental, and some neighborhood investment over there with $1 million match similar to North Point. And then payment of Beaufort Jasper Housing Trust dues, salaries and benefits we talked about, and some operating dollars. And those operating dollars are legal services, housing dashboard, the market studies. Part of the request and coming out of the strategic plan work is more of a dashboard for workforce availability, and I would call it more of a price index. And there's some dollars that we need to spend external to be able to obtain some of that information that's not available in our geographic information system. It's more of a market study. And then some operating costs, very, very low number of marketing costs. So therein lies the housing fund.
Yeah. Just to reiterate some of the comments that I made at first reading, we got very items of substance in the current budget. When I look at the housing fund current balance as of 3/31/2025, which is a slide further down, we have not seen yet. There's a little over $3 million in that fund balance. We are proposing a budget of almost $4 million. When I thought to think about the right idea, I agree with Ms. Turner that us moving the chief housing salary to the housing fund makes sense. When we talk about the Beaufort County Sheriff's Office stipend, which is direct to housing as well, that's a number that gets up over 100K per year as well. And then past year allocations to Habitat and CCDC, they're all in line with the framework of housing that I'm saying that we are as a housing business. Still make the argument that we should consider having some type of minimum fund balance for housing, so that we do not go into the red when it comes to this topic. Obviously, there's funding sources that we can consider, ATAX being one of them. We're very big supportive of the state legislation to allow for ATAX dollars to be used for housing. We have to understand that this threat of the mainland is real. Mr. Orlando, when I was first elected, thought to track what percentage of town employees actually live on the island. And he's done that ever since. And the mere fact that that percentage is not going up doesn't alarm me. But what would alarm me if it was going down, which means that people are now starting to move away from the island and other places, right? So us sort of staying static is good, as far as my vantage point is concerned. But it continues to be more and more in our face when we look at what's going to happen with development in Jasper County, particularly Hardyville. That is going to be harder and harder for us to attract folks that we need to maintain our level of service. So again, I am sort of reintroducing the idea of us having some type of fund balance minimum when it comes to housing.
Mayor, if I could add to that, at first reading, I also supported that. I'm mindful of the special legislation we asked for and received. It has a sunset clause in the ATAX funding, and I think we need to show that we are using that authority and spending it in an important cause here, and that is for housing. And I agree with Mr. Brown that we need to establish a minimum reserve along with the other reserve policy we're getting ready to discuss.
Others? What does that mean to do that? So I've heard from two, and I have to I'm in between first and second reading. And when I dive into the next section, you'll see why I'm asking that direct question the way I am. We can make it happen, but it's right. And so here's a couple of the challenges. We have a significant amount of work to do with North Point, Muddy Creek, Bryant Road this year. And sincerely, I wish we were a lot further along to spend the dollars you provided to us rather than ask for new, and we still didn't get there. Home repair is obviously missing from that. Home repair, there's some home repair grants. We have $80,000 left of the home repair funds. We spent $1.6 million as towards home repair. There's about $80,000 left. They're all under contract. I think that once we're fully staffed with our building inspectors, we can explore some of those grants that are out there. They're great grants, and they pay a dividend. I think it's 15%. If we qualify, we're looking into seeing if we qualify. But if we can, those grants are there and we get paid to do the work. We're also talking about Beaufort Jasper Housing Trust intergovernmental agreement. And I still think that there's some work we can do. Our chief housing officer resigned. He's moving back to Virginia Beach area. We congratulate him and we thank him for his time. And by no means is our housing program in flux, but we're kind of at a place of, trying to resurrect the Beaufort Jasper Housing Trust with our investment, and they're funded. The home repair program, while we're out of ARPA funds, they're still state funds. And keep in mind, we have a town attorney opinion that there's no other funds other than a tax that can be invested into housing in that home repair space. And so we're kind of in the middle of a few things. If you want me to add a fund balance for housing this year, I'll happily do so, but we've got to take it from something. And whether it's $500,000 as a just in case, I think that what we are looking at is bigger picture as well, with a recurring revenue stream. That's come up with all of you or some of you at times. And the recurring revenue stream, the qualified recurring revenue stream is, one, be really, really good at getting your grants every year. And those are hit or miss. Or two, allocate a portion of South Carolina accommodations tax as we bring that forward. We talked a little earlier about affiliated agency and ATAX application process changes. Do you want to, and we can talk about this later, but do you want to attribute a portion of South Carolina ATAX, while the state law allows it, towards housing? In this budget, it doesn't do that for some of the reasons I just said. We have dollars in here, but a recurring stream that is, as well as grant applications that we're starting to work towards uncovering. So
I think we need more discussion on it. And it may need to be a workshop down the road. Are we able to, when we come back into a mid-year budget revision, to add language to that, to address it?
as we explore these grants and achieve them, it would be a budget amendment in that regard.
I think the entire housing policy and how we're looking at it needs to be a workshop at some point, so we can have in-depth conversation, because there are changes on the federal level which will be pushed to state, and I would like to see what the state does with that and how they push it down to local municipalities. So there's more conversation that needs to take place on this, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm okay with that idea. When I look at this, once again, our draft strategic plan includes housing again. And when I look at this, and this is an accounting question because I have no idea what I'm talking about, but I see here there's $4 million, about $4 million, and it was $4 million last year. And if you look at our draft reserve policy included in our ordinance, there's a minimum. So I don't know what the right minimum is, but let's say it's 3.5 million. Well, we are at that minimum already for this year. So it doesn't seem like to me you would need a substantial amendment. You don't need to take that money from somewhere else because it's already there. Now, it seems as though we have some other reserves where it could come from if we needed to do that. But in the next year's budget, we would have to say, if that's our minimum, whatever the amount is, then we would need to provide for that in the next year. But in looking at what we've already done with the budget, and we're comparing that to our proposed new reserve policy, we're already there. So I think we're already there. But again, I'm not an accountant, nor did I ever play one on TV. Anyhow, if we have a commitment of the council to look at that, then I'm okay with another time period. But I'm just saying, whatever that minimum is, if it's less than $3,978,137, already there for this year.
Yeah, and I think that there's a bigger conversation with the Beaufort Jasper Housing Trust as to how they can be utilized to address some of the needs that we have, whether it's for home repair, if it's for other programs. I think there's additional conversations that need to, well, first of all, we've got to approve the current revisions to the Beaufort Jasper Housing Trust agreement. I just think it's more of a conversation, because we need to understand to Ms. Bryce's point, what does it need to be? And what's the purpose of having it there for future benefit of housing? What is it that we're trying to do? So.
Yeah. Let me be clear. I am okay with us taking this up during a housing workshop, looking at the funding sources so that we can maintain something. I am simply provoking thoughts with my colleagues, because let's Let's put the cause on the table. This is a controversial discussion. Every election cycle, it comes up. If we decided councils before to put money into a fund and did not know how we were going to spend it.
Yeah.
Now here we are about to spend $4 million. So it's real. And us talking about it very openly, I think needs to happen. That's where I'm going, right?
Understood. Okay. And so while y'all were talking, I pulled up my workshop. We're going to do a June strategic plan workshop, a July stormwater utility program workshop, an August CIP workshop, and a September housing workshop. And everything after that gets us into the land management ordinance and all our good work that we're writing. So we're in good shape, on good track. Okay.
Mark may also add that in June, I'm presenting to the FNA committee, the ATAX policy and also recommendation for a process for ATAX. And depending on what council decides in the future, the proposal that we put together for the FNA meeting of the council in July is not going to be housing at this moment.
Say that again?
So I'm saying that the process of what we recommended in June is a policy for a tax or process, a policy. And that will be proposed in June to FNA and July to town council.
Right. And the decisions to make, and I have them listed out, right? We're going to take a look at a distribution policy of ATAX, SCA tax. And so we know what the state requirements are, the 5%, the 30%, the 25K. And then I think we're going to show you, and I think we're going to show you trends over time, how we use state tax dollars. And so first and foremost, nonprofit grant recipients, what has been that amount? And then a percentage of collection. CIP amount, percentage of collection. Same with operations and housing, right? We've used housing in the past, SCA tax distribution for housing, and we'll show you that. And I think that's the back and forth conversation we need with town council, because you can simply add percentages to it all in a no less than in a fund balance and start growing that account. But it's a matter of what you all want to see from this staff. So there's the means. All right, well, I think we are.
I'm sorry, Mayor, the question I think it's, I apologize, Ms. Burnett. Did you say the current thinking that the proposed policy thinking is it does or does not include money for workforce housing?
Well, for housing in the past, we have allocated a portion paying tax. Now the decision is how much of that is going to be percentage going forward.
So
Right now, we can only tell you this is the trend, this is how much we have paid in the past.
Sure.
So going forward, it will be a decision of council to decide what percentage makes sense.
okay, so it does include a conversation about that. Okay, thank you.
It will. Let me be clear on that. It will. Okay. And then last but not least, you saw this. I think that this is a big part of the budget, while not affecting any particular fund. It is increasing our fund reserves. It's just simply establishing a policy where we're maintaining that our general fund current balance at 40 minimum, 55 max should remain the same. That we put a stormwater utility fund minimum balance in there. And so when I call a reserve that you don't spend before that line, because as an emergency, you might need it. And so we've, over time, have $16.6 million in stormwater, and a lot of our work, as we're talking about, we're concerned, what if we spend it all and we don't have it for that, like, no pun intended, well, pun intended, rainy day, right? So, but what we'd like to propose, and what we've proposed, is a $5 million fund reserve so that we can confidently spend the rest, right? We're doing the same real estate transfer fee, keep current. We're doing the same with beach preservation fee. There's $45 million in there. Our current reserve is a 12 million minimum, and we are proposing a minimum of $20 million. So increasing that $8 million, my goodness. And then still coming in anywhere between the 70-30 conversation and the 60-40 conversation on that cash to debt ratio as we fund beach renourishment. Next, hospitality tax. We have $24.7 million in there, about $13 million annual revenue, I think, somewhere around there, and a minimum reserve of $5 million. It's a 6-month balance. And then I think a significant improvement, I believe, in this budget, we've always talked about $20 million since Hurricane Matthew. What's our fund reserve? Was we know everything's gone up since then. I pledge to you that while this number increases this year from a 20 million, we'd like to change our policy. While our actuals are 37 million, the natural disaster fund reserve, we've proposed a 36 million minimum balance. And I asked for you to let me get my arms around this for a year to see how we can continue to invest, but also grow that, and know that we anticipate this balance policy changing again next year, increasing upward. So a significant improvement to our fund reserves that our bond rating agencies have commented on. Our revenues have stabilized, but their balances have gone up. Our property taxes reduced, and we talked a lot about our services today.
I do have some comment on this. If you add up all the pieces, it's about $100 million. So $100 million out of the total balance of $239 million. So just a fact. In regards to the policy, first of all, thank you for putting it all in one document. I know one of the issues has been, it has been put into different places and it wasn't easy to pull it all together. So I compliment you for that. I think it's very, very good to do that. And I'm very supportive of having minimum balances. I think that shows good fiduciary responsibility to ensure that you have a reserve, in case something happens. One of the things I noticed in the policy write-up is that for the new minimums that we are looking at, you have verbiage there that says authorization to utilize reserve funds shall require a resolution duly appointed by the town council, provided that circumstances allow for a council meeting to be conveyed in case you need to use that minimum balance. That is not included as verbiage for the general or the, real estate piece or the natural disaster. So I would request that you have consistency in language so that that resolution is required in tapping into any of the minimum balances. The other piece that I noticed on the real estate side is it does talk about how you're going to restore that balance in case something happens. And so that might be something that you might want to consider is, do we want to consider putting in a time period where we want to build back that balance? It's a question that I have out there that I think we should consider.
Thank you for that. We'll go back and make sure there's some consistency between that policy and the ordinance and whatnot. Do you all have, do you have a recommendation for the time period? Or is this something that you want to adopt as is today, or do you want to see our proposal at second and final reading? I have to look at that a little closer to make sense of that.
I have not thought about a specific time period, so I'd be comfortable if you want to take some time to think about it and have that at second.
Okay.
I just want some clarity on this question about the capital. Are you suggesting that for all fund balances or just the real estate?
No, I was just making the comment that the real estate transfer does say how it's going to be repopulated and the others do not. So it would be something for all balances that have a minimum requirement.
Yeah, I would strongly suggest we take some time on that one. But since you brings it up, I do want to sort of reiterate a point that I made 2 workshops ago when we were sort of debating cash versus debt. And I appreciate that Mr. Lambert has addressed the natural disaster for 36 million. And for those of us that were around when we had the unfortunate Hurricane Matthew come through, there were rumblings around the town if we were going to go broke or not, okay?
Right.
Obviously, we had bonding capacity to help us get out of that hole, and as a result of that, there was a millage increase to pay it back. So this is a very interesting topic because you just don't know how severe things are going to be. So depending on your spend, when you're trying to recover, will really determine how long it may or may not take for you to get back. So I appreciate the question that she's asking. I'd like to dig into that a bit. That's very interesting.
Okay.
That's why we don't have an answer.
Right.
Specific time.
Absolutely, go ahead.
So to that point, over the years when that was being discussed and the years beyond that, as we looked at that balance, there was good information and advice that was brought forward in terms of the status of reimbursements, costs to rebuild, et cetera. And I would ask that part of that conversation includes some of that expert testimony so that we could have some solid basis to making those judgments with rather than kind of a guess. So I think that if we do that, we'll be in a good position. And so I ask for that information as well.
I want to make sure I understand what you're looking for at second and final reading. Not at second and final
At
reading?
least I'm not. I don't know about myself. I think that's too soon to try to
Yeah.
polish up that crystal ball that Mr. Alvin's challenge you on.
And I don't care if we don't have it for second reading as long as it's something that we commit to doing.
Okay.
Exploring and discussing.
Yes, ma'am.
I would agree with that as well.
That's good with me.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. I do, though, the language consistency is important.
Yes, we'll
So
make
that
sure
piece, yes.
some of that is.
I also think that as we start having the conversations about borrowing, that we have the conversation in regards to emergency borrowing as to what we need to keep in a coffer for millage in case we've got it. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Very good. Good job. Good job.
So Mayor, I do have a question about following up on the ordinance. I wasn't sure whether there's going to be a different slide on this, but in the ordinance itself, it refers to the Airbnb settlement and sets out of the $5,614,031, that 2.6 goes to the beach preservation fee fund, and then a little over 1.5 million general fund local accommodations tax. And then again, a little over 1.5 million for general fund business license tax. And my question is, for beach preservation, that would be what I would call a capital expense. I always think when you get a large chunk of money like that, it's better to spend on a major project as opposed to operating costs. So my question, I guess, really is the general fund, a little over 1.5 million for local accommodations tax, and then 1.5 for business license tax. Is that part of the operating budget, or are those for some sort of capital matters?
So as part of the settlement, one of the requirements as part of the settlement is the allocation of funding, not necessarily the amount, but the allocation. So we were asked to allocate it with general fund and the tax, like the accumulation tax. So that's operating. So for this portion, we can utilize a portion for CIP for beach nourishment or as part of this reserve amount.
So they're in those funds, and we can decide during this year how to spend them for capital.
This year, yes, absolutely. It's not up on this slide. It is in your ordinance,
What I'm
whatnot.
looking at, yeah. So does that mean that's part of those reserves for particular funds?
The 2.6 is part of the reserve, yes.
Yeah, the 2.6 for beach preservation. So how about the general fund local accommodations tax, a little over 1.5, and the general fund business license tax, a little over 1.5
That one is currently allocated to general fund.
for operating? Okay. So we have about 3 million going into operating. Okay. And 2.6 going into capital.
Right, and it's going into reserves, which we rarely use general fund operating for anything other than emergency management, unless we are asking you for those dollars as part of a capital project investment, right? We always say we're never using one-time money for recurring expenditures. And so rarely, and you think back the last few years I've been here, we're not coming to you asking you for general fund reserve for cap projects unless there's something that's really important. So what we're doing is growing the reserve of the general fund, which is just in case operating money, that if that storm or something does hit. And so that distribution, well, we just more or less distributed everything equally. You could put $5 in one account and the rest in all the others. There's no real reason to it. We've just distributed as a proposal equally.
So to my question then, that 3 million is actually going into the reserve fund as opposed to paying for the paper I'm looking at right today. I mean, I don't mean this exact paper, but I'm talking about operating expenses like paper, et cetera, utilities, whatever.
We're not using the settlement funds to balance our budget.
Thank you.
We're growing our reserves.
Okay.
You can move your reserves around at a later date any way you want, as long as you're meeting your minimum threshold policy.
Yeah, just what Nate set out, that's not apparent. It appears as though that's part of the operating budget. If you look at the language of the ordinance. That's why I asked the question.
And one thing to also, like Mr. O'Neill just mentioned, we don't have to allocate X amount of money. We can allocate $5. So however council wants to allocate the funding, we do have to allocate among those 3 different funds, but not the amounts.
Sure. Okay.
May I ask Sean, who had a facial expression as he looked at me, is there something that we need to be talking about right now? I'm full, like, let's just talk about it and fix it.
No, I understand the point of clarification
Okay.
for what's in the policy. So,
All right, we can work on
Yeah,
that.
we can
Okay,
work
good.
on that.
All right.
That was my-
That was a good look. All right.
I know, but your light's working now. I'm
All
not
right.
trying to read.
Great.
You know?
Do we have anybody signed up to speak? Okay.
It's Richard Beasy.
Good afternoon, Richard Bisbee, Indigo Run. First, thank you all for changing the time. Tomorrow's budget workshop at 5 p.m. However, keep in mind, of course, that thousands of residents generally work 9 to 5 if they happen to work in Bluffton or Buford, even Hilton, quite frankly. Making a 5 o'clock meeting is actually impossible. So I suggest stagger the times. Once a month, meet at 3, second meeting at 6. This is reasonable and should take no more than 10 minutes to accomplish. And I remain hopeful that the change we made is not simply what you would call a one-off. And to avoid meetings going very late, we don't want to, interrupt people's bedtime. You could have an executive session prior to the start of your regular meeting, much like the County Board of Education. The proposed $175 million budget purports to ease some of the tax burden on our residents by including a 2 mil property tax reduction. Let us be clear, taxes are calculated, I don't have a CPA, but taxes are calculated by the mill rate times the value of your home. And since most homes continue to increase in value, your taxes will most likely go up, not down. Most of us would acknowledge that in any government structure, whether federal, state, or local, there's waste, fraud, and abuse. With that in mind, please don't be offended, but I believe that we need to establish a DOGE committee comprised of 5 local CPAs who need an Elon Musk type approach. And another issue, Josh Gruber told the council last fall to expect about $1 million from beach parking fees. The budget before you now projects only $650,000 in new revenue. And if the mayor has his way, the revenue is going to be even less. And what about $600,000 in public funds to dredge Harbor Town? It's a private commercial yacht basin. Why are public monies being used for a private venture? Tax money can only be used for the entire benefit of all taxpayers, not just a few. We spend millions of dollars to promote Hilton Head tourism. And with 40 plus years of marketing and public relations experience, I am confident there are private firms that could do a better job than the chamber at a lower cost. Put this lucrative contract out to bid. Competition breeds success. And the $64,000 question for all of you is simply this. How many tourists can Hilton Head accommodate? We are close to 3 million visitors now. Is the magic number 4? Is it 5 million? It's a capacity issue staring us in the face and an issue that you have yet to resolve. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor,
Yes.
one, Mr. Scott.
Okay. Okay.
Scott?
Apologize, I didn't turn it in earlier, but just listening to the presentation here, there's some things that came to my mind. More, because kind of on the top is the Gullah Geechee Historic Neighborhood, the CDC, and the financing of the CDC. You know, as I sit here and I'm looking around this chamber, and I see all the posters here that highlight the significance of the Gullah Geechee community. But there's no funding for that from the town. I mean, we have to all ask ourselves, do we really matter? I'm watching this, I'm looking at this, and apparently we have been mattering. But the state has provided money, the county isn't even providing money. But the town has provided nothing towards our sustainability. We've been crying, literally crying tears to help for us to be sustained here on Hilton Head, on this world-class resort destination. Why aren't we on the page? I mean, do we really matter? It's really bothersome when I see this, because we talk about it, and we love celebrations, but when the pen hits the paper, where is it? You all have to ask yourself that. Next year, put up another celebration sign, and we're losing our land. We don't have businesses. When we put money into the PUDs, which we need, drainage, stormwater, memorandum, what do we call it? Memorandum of agreements with them. But yet, we don't have the services that we need to sustain. We have an opportunity. We have an opportunity with the state. They came in and said, here, here's some seed money, start something, do something. County, here's a little bit, but here's something. But not one line item for the CDC. We can do better. We deserve it. The Gullah community deserves it. Thank you.
Thank you. That it? Do we have anybody sign up for non-agenda items? Nope. All right, so we'll take a motion to. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Town Council. I know you guys have had a long day and you've been working hard trying to come up with a financial plan for us as far as the town is concerned. And I commend you on your effort to address the pressing issues that are facing us. Drainage is one of them, and we all know that today. In fact, I'm about to go into the business of opening up a fishing pond. You have basically covered a lot of things that are important to us, and that is the basic needs of living on Hilton Head. I think the affordable housing effort or the workforce housing effort we cannot allow that to just fall through the cracks. Really can't. That is critical. That's essential. I had the experience Friday of visiting my doctor, and the medical assistant said that she had to leave early because she had to go to Bluffton to pick up her kids before the weather. And she didn't live on Hilton Head, and so I ended up in the office basically with an inexperienced person. I'm still here, thank God. I had a plumber to come from Beaufort, not from Beaufort, I'm sorry, from Ridgely. And last week to do some work at the house, and he said, oh, I've got to get moving before 2:30 because I've got to get up this island before the traffic stop. Because I don't live on the island, I can't afford to live on the island. Workforce housing or housing is not available. That I can, critical stuff that you guys discussing, and I hope certainly that you will come up with some means of continuing to support and making those things priority. Ty covered the other issue that I'm very, very concerned about, folks, and that is the CDC. What I'm about to say may not be liking, but it is how I feel about what is happening based on what I just heard about the budget and what's happening with CDC. You all have adopted a child, redhead child, basically. And you all adopted the child basically because there were dollars coming with the child. And now that the child is up and trying to make it on his or her own, we are saying that this child is going to be on his own until we find out that the child is out of money. And if the child is out of money, we may have to give the child back to the adoptive agency. That's not the way we should operate. You know, it's a good feeling to feel good about being able to adopt a person. It's a good feeling to put something on your resume and say that I really adopted a person. It's a very good thing to say that we're in the ballgame, but until we really put our money where our mouth are, we are really not doing anything but giving lip service.
I need to stop you there. You're over your 3
I want
minutes.
to let you know that
Thank you.
I understand what you guys are doing, but please, let's look at it from a different perspective.
Thank you. Thank you. Seeing none, any last comments from council? Seeing none, motion to adjourn?
Second.
We're adjourned. Thank you all.